let's go to the next topic, which is really about a frictionless ecosystem. How does that become frictionless? Amazon is frictionless. Like, just stop there and think about Amazon. You don't have to think about Amazon. It just happens. You don't have to think about the warehouse. You don't have to think about the logistics. You don't have to think about anything. It just happens. It happens because there's technology that's innovative, that's automative, that is intuitive. So if we think about that, all of that is somewhat like machines or new technologies that are cloud-based or anything like that, right? But we still need the human touch in campuses. And that's where I want to talk about, is because even if we become totally Amazon-like, even if we had a Netflix kind of world in our learning, even if we had a educational marketplace, you still need humans to guide humans around critical thinking, critical thought, right? So I'm going to start the next poll. Which is about human touch. What will make campuses more human and frictionless? And I love the dialogue. While you guys are putting in your answers, if you guys want to speak to this is important, because we have to recognize, what should we do on campus? And I have a whole ideation on this, and I don't want to sway any of you guys to think differently. I'll talk about it afterwards, but I would love to understand, what do you think humans should be doing on campus if machines are doing really effective work on other things?
Matt, was it your intention that you can only choose one?
Yeah, you can only pick one on this poll, Matt.
Oh my God, I must have messed up on that. This is why I need some sort of machine that follows me and fixes my stuff. So go ahead and vote on the one. My fault.
Yeah, my technologies go wrong when it's go wrong.
Yeah, well, I had this. This was my real goal. I want you guys to talk about this in a much different way. Like, give me your opinion on this is probably a better way of approaching this. So of course, listening and interacting has to be done. More on-demand support, and we call it telehealth, a telesupport, those are going to become really big players in our ecosystem. We use short messaging, SMS, chat, right?
Matt,
yeah, go ahead.
You know I have a lot to talk about on this subject. My answer was personalized learning, which probably was a combination of everything above it, whether it's in person or online. I see Art, you shaking your head, my friend from Twitter. We talked about this earlier this week, that the shift from focusing on teaching needs to happen to focused on learning. Where are kids learning? Where are they spending time right now? Generation Z, Generation Y, not just the adult learners. They're on things like Twitch, Discord, Slack, something that I just was introduced to, Clubhouse, yeah,
TikTok,
even TikTok, 15 seconds. But for so long, we've been pulling these students out of their element, their world, and bringing them into our world. It should be the other way around. The students are what? They're the consumers. What other company pulls consumers and say, I don't want you in your comfort zone, come play in mine?
Yeah.
None. Or they're not existing anymore.
So Elliot, that I think really speak to that. There are 2 points in the chat that speak to that. One is Chris Lane asked just a few moments ago, why is it that higher ed seems to always lag behind other industries? And here's everybody else who's using all of these things. And we're still talking to some people about how they're going to use technology that most of the students have moved from. And Denise Goin also, he sort of related to all of that, goes, we need to ban this. We need to ban the statement, this is the way we've always done it. And we need to ban
I
that,
like that.
we need to ban it both from the faculty side, but also the student side. It goes to your question of, why, personalized learning, why are we not doing these things? We have all these technologies and we aren't pulling them in. What's holding us back?
So this is the great thing about Zoom In. In Zoom In, we have people who design software that are in our audience that may be willing to step in and say, why is it that we design differently than what the needs are, right? Is it because technology is advancing so fast and they can't keep up because there's quarterly numbers you got to keep up and things like that? Or is it because by the time they finish their design, by the time it gets released, we're so fast in this modern cycle that new technology like Clubhouse came out of nowhere, but we should be using Clubhouse in a campus.
Hey, Matt, can I add another element to it just from a vendor perspective?
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest obstacles that I see working with institutions is just this culture of customizations. And I think that, Denise spoke to it and Mikayla spoke to it and some others spoke to the fact that, we're used to systems that we've had the ability to customize and make unique to our institution, which allows us not to grow because it becomes too cumbersome to maintain those integrations, right? To adopt new technology that is more standard process, more modern process. So I think part of the conversation is changing that culture and managing the change of that culture to move away from, like what Denise said, this is how we've always done it, but also, let's build it for us. No, let's change the way we do business so we can adapt more modern business practices to be more efficient. So I think that's part of the conversation. And I think that it's scary to people because it makes people concerned for their job security. It makes people really think about, well, what does this mean for me? When in reality, it's holding the entire institution back because we're thinking in a way that is sometimes 15, 20 years old in the way we handle business processes.
And then also, Matt, also, let's not forget that all the things that we're talking about is also reflected in long-term structures and long-term contracts at the university, right? So even if you want to change, for example, the company that Elliot works for is probably, I say this as a former employee of ProQuest Ex Libris, I'm very familiar with Follett. I think what Elliot is doing is probably one of the more innovative companies, but try to get into those established structures. I don't know what your opinion is, Elliot, but so that's another obstacle, right? There is vendors that have multi-year contracts, and I'm not going to call it kickbacks, but that certain universities are dependent upon funds that these vendors provide for them to actually operate.
Wow, I've been in this 30 years. That's the first time I've never heard that they get kickbacks.
Well, they're not called kickbacks. They're called whatever they're called, right?
They're scholarships.
Scholarships. Right?
They're scholarships and things like that. I think that Fridrich's right on the mark about that. And I think that's part of the culture of higher education that needs to change is who's the boss here? Okay, it's not we go in and we get these lengthy contracts that go and stipulate all the various things that they're going to do, they're not going to do, the privacy of information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we have to, as an institution, you have to sign on or walk away. And I really think that needs to change. I've talked to a number of vendors this last week about the privacy thing. Actually, Elliot was one of them, about the privacy matter. And really, we're getting to a point in the game because of AI and all the other technologies that are coming into higher education that ultimately the student needs to have the right to go and say that you can use my information in this way, or that you can't use it in this way. So it really, that's one model that has to change. And then going back to Allison's point in terms of you know, who's supposed to, and it's a really, this one's complex, but who needs to be driving the ship on where ERPs go and what we need to buy into and accept regardless of whether we want to or not. And thirdly and finally, long-term contracts. That's just that's you maybe have a 5-year with a renewal every year with stipulations as to why you can walk out of that contract after the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th year. But it should be reviewed every year, especially on massive contracts for ERPs.
Yeah, and going to your point, and again, I'd like to emphasize what Denise has said as well, and I feel this. You know, part of what happens with that, you know, you talked about we spend so much time customizing the software to do something. And, you know, Denise points it out, and it goes back to what we were also talking about in the pre-gathering of, you know, by the time you finish customizing your software to do what it was that you decided to do, which may be an ancient business process anyway, you know, it's taking you 2 years and the next new thing is already out there, and probably the next new thing is already out there. So the moment you flip the switch, you're antiquated at that point. And that's one of the advantages of sort of doing that very core, you know, software that then has other point solutions in, you know, interfacing in, because you can keep up without having to do an entire rip and replace. And I used to work in banks. You put in a finance system, there was no altering the finance system to match your business process. You stayed with the finance system. Highly regulated, that's part of it, but you stayed with the finance system. There wasn't, you know, you go to Wells Fargo and you go to Bank of America, there aren't 5 different ways to cash a check, you know?
So I would, I've been trying to craft a balanced look at this, and I have a little time on my hands. There is a certain amount, I'll just refer to it as collusion, although I don't mean it in such a negative light, between the institutions and the software vendors. One thing I would caution anyone, particularly this group, about is doing a comparison of Amazon to some of the higher ed systems. It's easy, it's nice to do that. I've literally been in meetings with the executive of a team of a Russell Group institution that complained about usability. You know, they complained that we were making too many commercial references in our software, and then lectured me about why can't it be more like Amazon, with a very standard way of buying things. There's only one way. And so one of the underlying challenges is that some of these systems are very difficult. They're much more like manufacturing systems than banking systems. So you don't go into a Toyota or manufacturing place and standardize the same way. They need to be more flexible, but a lot of the things that have been customized are a little over the top, but the cycle in which vendors can innovate based on mandates from campuses or states or regulatory things is a mismatch. And so you have institutions that want these very complex pieces of enterprise software, but don't really want to pay for it. And they don't want to move forward. And so the vendor, you're saying, okay, I got to support current version, 1 back, 2 back, oh, I guess 4 back. Oh, I got regulatory stuff that nobody thinks is real development. They just think it happens as part of their maintenance cycle, when the development can be tremendous. And so the vendors are saying, well, I don't have enough revenue in this market to do anything other than support these back versions and keep it in regulatory compliance. So you end up with this hairball of fixed architecture, and there's a lot of other elements to this. You could literally book a whole hour discussion around
Disagree with
elements.
And we can do that.
You need business process standardization, not just data standardization. You need a lot of different things, but you will always have to provide a way for institutions to extend. Some people refer to as customization, because of the nature of the business. And so it's a multi-dimensional problem for which there are multi-dimensional solutions.
Yeah, I agree with you to a point, Mark. But one of the things that I also see is that that universities don't ask themselves the why. Why am I doing this customization? You know, so much of that customization comes up from this is the way we've always done it. And yes, I agree with you, Mark. A customization is great if it is, or an extension is great if it's something that is unique to that university that makes it unique in the marketplace.
Yeah,
But an implementer, a lot of what
I don't disagree with that. I just don't think that's as big an issue as it used to be. And it isn't the real core of the issue that's driving this continued attachment to these big legacy systems. It's a problem, yes. How big a problem now? I'm not so sure anymore.
Mary Beth, go ahead.
Well, I just want to add in, been at a university, this is my 40th year. Some of the customization is really flexibility. I'm at the end of, billing student financials, but it's the competitive nature of higher ed and what the marketing is trying to do, and enrollment coming in with specialized programs and flexible things for this and that. So a lot of our customization isn't to make it like it was, so my life is easier. It's to adapt to all these crazy things that are happening and have that flexibility to support any kind of learning, anytime, we're rolling terms, start class today. We've still got financial aid regulations, so you got to go to the core, and somebody's got to talk to the Department of Ed and say, give us some flexibility.
Yeah.
They've got goalposts where you've got to start and end terms. We want people to come and learn and, drop out and come back and get the certificates that they need for stuff. Every school is trying to do that in the most competitive and service oriented way, but it's heck on the back end.
Yeah.
To try to support that. So I don't think the schools, it takes years to implement a big system and to get all the campus to play nice and come up with some kind of rules.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't happen in this business. Everybody's doing their own thing.
Well, I think there has to be a middle ground because, and this is not a joke, I have been asked within the last 10 years, I have been asked to retrofit a page that was already retrofitted to mimic the mainframe. There's money and time and effort going into where it shouldn't be going into. And that was kind of my point is, my other example is I had a report I was asked to retrofit, and in tracking down who owned it and what they did with it, they literally printed it off in the basement and put it in the recycle bin every day. But they've always had it. So don't take it away. And so, yes, there's some customizations or changes to the business process that need to happen. But then there's also some that we're just stuck on. And those are the ones that need to go away.
So
let's evaluate before we automatically say we must have it.
So one of the fallacies, and I've designed student systems for years, is that they believe their core element, like enrolling a student, is unique to them. And the reality of it is, no, they pick a course and they get put in and you got to live with it. Now, all the programs and the color scheme and those are, I get, that makes you a little bit different, makes you feel different. Maybe the way that how many times you email someone is different, right? But the actual core elements of financial aid, student financials, admissions, and records, core stuff, I don't care if you're Stanford and I don't care if you're Miami-Dade, and I've designed both of them. They're the same, right? And that's what I think people don't realize. Everyone thinks that they're the snowflake that has a different registration process. And I keep saying to them, and I'll be honest, part of the reason I decided to leave and stop doing student systems is I felt like it was Groundhog's Day. I was like, my God, I can't keep having you spend this much millions of dollars to do what you always have done. Stop and rethink what you need to do. And let's start to really serve the public way we should.
Matt, I think you just addressed the elephant in the room, because everyone thinks it. And it's what we all hear every day in conversations about how unique, and everyone's afraid to address it because you don't want to be offensive to an institution because it's their culture and it's their history. And, but I agree, you've got to think more subjectively when it comes to.
I'll be honest.
Looking at technology.
Financial aid directors scare the daylights out of everyone by saying, hey, we're going to get audited. And the reality of it is, if you look at the rules, the systems you've just bought in most cases function really well on those rules. if you follow those rules. Like it's that
If
kind
you
of stuff.
follow them, yeah.
If you follow them, yeah, if you follow them. But I love this discussion because I think it's a discussion that, you know, when we think about the cloud, everyone needs to move to the cloud. Everyone needs to do that. But when you start doing it, you have to start remembering what is it your new operating model is. And Mary Beth, I would love to sit in a room with you and listen to all of the things you're trying to do, because I think there's a bridge between that discussion and the student cloud products, which are all immature. I don't know if anyone's online, but they're immature and they're not ready for prime time. So let's not tell anyone that they're ready for prime time. Let's start designing with a Mary Beth's design model. And we're working with a school in Miami that is starting to think about online ecosystem. How do they design their courses for an online ecosystem? So I love it. We're at our next 20-minute block. I'll give someone a last word before I move to the next topic. And I do want to appreciate both Freddie and Mark, because I called all of them out a little bit in terms of software, and of course Allison, which they know they built software, right? And so I get it, and I understand it's a tough thing, but I appreciate them jumping on and giving us their perspective.